The courtyard of the Red Keep was awash in the honeyed light of a fresh dawn when Eddard Stark first realized he could no longer remain silent. King's Landing had never felt like home to him, its air too thick, the city too loud, the incessant politics and pride of courtiers weighing like chains upon his every step. He longed for Winterfell's cool serenity. And yet, in that moment, as he strode past the garrison to the Tower of the Hand, he knew he would not see the north for many moons. A promise pulled at him, insisted upon his attention, and refused to let him rest. He had hardly slept the night before. Ghosts had come to him in dream, the shimmer of a tower rising lonely in the desert sun, the hush of a crypt beneath Winterfell, the cry of a baby. And Lyanna, always Lyanna. In those haunted moments between sleeping and waking, he heard her voice again, soft, trembling, and full of an impossible yearning. "Ned," she whispered. "Swear to me," he had sworn. He remembered how he had taken her hand in his, how her eyes, once bright as the winter sky, had lost their luster. He remembered the smell of cold stone and fresh blood. He remembered the weight of a promise that should never have been demanded of him. When he roused himself from the bed cold with the sweat of nightmares, the vow lay on his tongue like iron. But another memory pressed upon him. Lyanna had spoken not only of her child, hidden from Robert's wrath, but also of peace. That had been her last desire. She had wanted the realm to be spared more bloodshed. She had wanted her beloved brother and the man who had once cared for her deeply to find a way to end the cycle of hatred. It was madness, Ned told himself. How could Robert Baratheon, newly seated on the Iron Throne, possibly let go of his enmity for House Targaryen? But in Lyanna's name, Eddard Stark would try. In the corridor that led from his private chambers to the tower's main hall, he paused. A pair of Lannister guards passed him, speaking in low voices, giving him deferential nods but otherwise ignoring him. He clenched his jaw. The Lannisters already had too much power here, quietly weaving themselves through the cracks in the Red Keep's architecture like vines. Yet that was not his immediate concern. His worry was far more immediate, far more urgent. How would Robert respond if he heard about Lyanna's last wish? They had quarreled before on the matter of Targaryens. Ned had petitioned for mercy toward the children in the Red Keep after the sack of King's Landing. Robert had brushed him aside, adopting a cold practicality. In Robert's eyes, any Targaryen was an enemy, no matter how young, how innocent. For him, Rhaegar's sins were an eternal brand upon that entire bloodline. And yet Ned could not forget the timid babe he had found in the Tower of Joy. If Robert's hatred was left unchecked, how long before he discovered that there might be a living heir hidden away? Ned exhaled heavily as he reached the Tower of the Hand. The tapestry-laden walls did little to comfort him. He was not a man cut out for politics or secrets, but the gods had given him no choice. To betray Lyanna's final wish felt like an abomination he could not live with. So he would speak. And if Robert's reaction would be fury, then Ned would hold fast as best he could. He allowed himself one final moment of solitude before he headed to the Great Hall to see the king. In that moment, he thought of Catelyn. She had come to him late in the night, worried about his unsettled mind. He had not told her the full truth, only that he had matters weighing on him. Catelyn had tried to comfort him, but no comfort could chase away a vow sworn to a dying sister. He hoped that one day she might understand. Summoning what strength the gods had granted him, he walked with measured steps out of the Tower of the Hand and into the sprawl of the Red Keep. Servants and guards crossed his path, and the hush that followed in his wake betrayed his high station. He was the king's hand now, and every man and woman in this fortress understood his closeness to Robert. They gave him wide berth, uncertain whether to greet him with a bow or to duck away lest they draw his ire. He ignored them all, determined not to let the stirrings of the court distract him. At last he reached the Great Hall. The Iron Throne loomed at the far side, a monstrous silhouette of fused swords, and upon it sat Robert Baratheon, King of the Seven Kingdoms, the Hammer of the Rebellion. The light fell upon his broad shoulders and bearded face. Once, Robert had been the most charismatic man Ned had ever known, a friend he loved like a brother. But the Iron Throne had changed him, weighed on him as heavily as any anchor. The throne was built to be uncomfortable, to remind a king that the price of power was vigilance and sacrifice. Ned wondered how comfortable Robert truly was behind that bluster. A hush fell across the hall. Peter Baelish stood by one of the pillars, half smiling as if at some private joke. Varys was near the dais, face as smooth as polished marble, always listening, always watching. Pycelle hovered in the background. Ser Barristan Selmy stood in his white cloak, solemn and composed. The weight of so many eyes made Ned's pulse quicken, but he would not be cowed. "Your Grace," Ned said, his voice carrying through the chamber. Robert waved off the formalities, but a small knot of bystanders remained, courtiers and petitioners waiting their turns. Your Grace, Ned repeated, stepping forward until he was within a few feet of the dais. There is a matter I must speak with you about. A private matter. Robert's eyebrows shot up. He was already in a foul mood. Ned could see it in the way his grip on the throne's armrest tightened. Perhaps he had been forced to endure a tedious morning of petty grievances. Is it urgent? He rumbled. I've half the realm's trifles to deal with yet. Ned bowed his head slightly. It is. I fear that it cannot wait. A flicker of curiosity passed over Robert's features, mingled with exasperation. Ser Barristan, he said, clear the hall. We shall resume these audiences later. Then to Ned, come closer and speak, old friend. Ned waited as the room emptied, save for 2 gold cloaks who stood at a discreet distance and Ser Barristan at Robert's flank. Robert eyed him impatiently. What is it that drags you here at this hour, Ned? You look as if you've swallowed a stone. Ned pressed his lips together, searching for the right words. I'm about to speak of Lyanna. The name froze the air between them. Robert's gaze darkened, and for a moment, the old wound that had never healed cracked open. Lyanna, he repeated, voice lower. What of her? Ned could not hide his tension. He clasped his hands behind his back to keep them steady. I've kept a secret, one that has weighed on my conscience for years. It concerns Lyanna's final wish before the end. For a moment, Robert said nothing. He glanced at Ser Barristan, then gave an almost imperceptible nod. The Kingsguard bowed and retreated another few steps, giving them a semblance of privacy. The king leaned forward, his broad chest heaving with a heavy breath. Speak plainly, Ned. No riddles. Ned thought he could feel his own heart's thunder in his ears. He had rarely seen Robert so guarded. She spoke of peace, he said, forcing out each word. She did not want the realm torn apart in hatred. Rhaegar was gone, yes, but she feared the vengeance that might befall innocent blood, Targaryen or otherwise. Robert's expression darkened further, a storm cloud in the shape of a man. Rhaegar was no innocent, he spat. Ned braced himself. She was not speaking of Rhaegar alone. She worried for the entire realm. The war was won. The Targaryens were defeated. She wanted no further slaughter. And she made me promise. Robert gripped the throne's arm so hard Ned feared the old swords might snap. What did you promise? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. Ned held his friend's gaze, refusing to falter. She made me promise I would do everything in my power to end the bloodshed. She wanted me to speak to you, Robert. She did not hate the Targaryens as you do. She believed that continuing to spill their blood would only plant the seeds for more war. Robert's face went ruddy. You want me to spare them? He thundered, voice echoing in the vast hall. Those dragons, who burned and pillaged, who cost me my betrothed. She wasn't your betrothed anymore? Ned said quietly, hating himself for correcting Robert on such a raw fact. She left with Rhaegar. However it happened, we cannot change the past. But Lyanna's last wish was for an end to the killing. The king's eyes glinted with a fierce, almost animal fury. The Targaryens took her. Rhaegar took her from me. He paused to steady himself, and Ned saw a flicker of old grief behind the anger. Do you forget the horrors your own family faced? Brandon, your father. He could not bring himself to say more. Ned swallowed. He remembered the day he had learned of Brandon's death, the day the smell of burning flesh etched itself into his nightmares. I remember, he said, voice tight. And yet Lyanna asked for mercy. Her reasons I do not fully understand. But she was determined. She wanted me to speak to you, to plead with you to spare those who do not bear guilt. Robert let out a frustrated growl. For a moment, Ned expected him to strike something, to unleash his wrath in a hail of fury. Instead, he clenched his fists. All these years, you kept this from me. You knew how I felt, and yet you remained silent. Why speak now? Ned's throat felt parched. Because I can no longer live with the burden alone. The realm is not at peace, Robert. There are whispers of Targaryens across the narrow sea. If they return, if we do not consider how to temper this hatred, we risk another war. A war Lyanna never wanted. For a long moment, Robert was silent. His chest rose and fell with each ragged breath. Finally, he spoke in a low, icy voice. Leave me, Ned. I need time to reflect. Ser Barristan, show Lord Stark the door. I will speak to him again when I choose. Ned bowed his head. A swirl of guilt and relief coiled in his gut. The words were said, the vow partly fulfilled. Whether it would do any good was in the hands of the gods. With careful steps, he retreated from the throne room and let Ser Barris and escort him out. As the massive doors closed behind him, Ned felt the eyes of courtiers on him again, quiet speculation painted on their faces. They would wonder what had transpired, what could have possibly made the king's hand and the king itself so troubled. But Ned spoke not a word. He marched from the great hall, a single prayer echoing in his mind, "Forgive me, Lyanna, if this was wrong." 3 days passed with no word from Robert. Ned tried to go about his duties as hand, but every note he read, every hearing he oversaw weighed on him anew. Would Robert's silence end in violence, or in a weary acceptance of what could not be changed? At times, Ned feared a summons would arrive commanding him to gather men and hunt down any rumored Targaryen supporters. But the summons never came. Catelyn, seeing his distress, pressed him for answers. She asked if there was more trouble between him and the king, if the burden of the realm was too great. Ned demurred, giving her only fragments. She respected his reticence, though he could feel the tension building between them, that quiet worry that any wife would have when her husband bore such a heavy secret. On the 4th day, a messenger delivered a command for Ned to attend the king in his solar at midday. The hour came, and Ned ascended the steps, flanked by a pair of Lannister guards who parted ways once he entered the hallway leading to Robert's private chambers. The door stood ajar. Inside, he could hear low voices, Robert's and another that belonged to Jon Arryn, the king's hand before Ned, and a man who had been a father figure to both. Jon was speaking calmly, and Robert responded with gruff, clipped phrases. As Ned stepped in, they both looked up. Jon Arryn's face was grave but kind, his hair a thinning silver. "Ned," he said in greeting. Robert stood by a table, a map of the 7 kingdoms spread across it, half-finished tankard of ale beside him. The king nodded tersely, motioning for Ned to close the door behind him. When Ned did so, he took a moment to collect himself. "I told Jon about your claims," Robert said, voice steady but cold. "He's been counseling me on the matter. I want you to speak plainly, as you did before. If there's more to Lyanna's words, more that you concealed, now is the time to say it." Ned studied Robert's expression. There was anger there still, but also a painful curiosity. Jon Arryn's face was carefully neutral, though Ned could sense sympathy in his eyes. "I have said all I know," Ned replied quietly. "She asked for peace, Robert. She did not wish any child of Targaryen blood, or any child of any house, to pay for the sins of their forebears." At that, Robert's nostrils flared. "Children," he growled. "Rhaegar had children. I saw what was done to them in the sack, though I gave no orders for that. I would not weep for them either. Targaryens spawn only tragedy. That was how I saw it." "You blame them all for what happened," Ned said, but Lyanna saw a chance to break the cycle. "She did not want you to carry that hatred until it destroyed you or destroyed the realm." Robert slammed his fist on the table, rattling the tankard. Ale sloshed over the map. "The realm is safe," he barked. "I am the king, no Targaryen shall dethrone me. If they ever dared set foot again on Westerosi soil, I would see them ended." Jon Arryn placed a steadying hand on Robert's arm. "Your Grace, calm yourself. We must hear all sides. If there truly are Targaryens still alive across the narrow sea, Daenerys and Viserys, the children of the Mad King, what is your plan?" Robert jerked away from Jon's touch. "My plan? Make certain they never gain a foothold. I will see to it that my informers—" But Ned cut in, gently but firmly. "Your Grace, that is the hatred Lyanna wished to stop. Varys's whispers say the Targaryen children are mere youths in exile with little means. Killing them or pursuing them might only stir sympathy. That was Lyanna's point. More bloodshed only sows vengeance in the hearts of the defeated." A vein throbbed in Robert's temple. He looked torn, caught between fury and something else that might have been old sorrow. His voice dropped. "And what does your precious sister's wish mean for the realm? That I should open my gates and let the Targaryens return? That I should cower while they plot my overthrow?" "Of course not," Ned said. "Only that you recognize they are not Rhaegar. They are not the ones who took Lyanna from you. They are children innocent of his crimes." "Innocent," Robert echoed bitterly. "The babe who was dashed against the wall in King's Landing was innocent too, but that was war. War spares no innocence." A leaden silence settled. Jon Arryn cleared his throat. "It is not war anymore, Your Grace. We are in peacetime. We must consider the good of the realm. As your hand, Ned is only trying to honor his sister's memory. He believes that a more temperate stance might be wise in the long run." Robert turned away from them both, gazing at the window where the sunlight slanted across the floor in a bright rectangle. He remained quiet for some time until at last he rumbled, "I cannot promise mercy if those Targaryens attempt to retake the throne. But if they remain in exile and pose no imminent threat, perhaps I will not send assassins after them. I do not do this for them," he added fiercely, turning to glare at Ned. "I do it for Lyanna and for you, old friend. But by all the gods, if they cross the sea with banners raised, I will meet them with steel." Ned bowed, relief warred with apprehension in him. "Thank you, your grace. That is all I ask. An end to needless slaughter." Robert grunted. "Do not mistake me, Ned. My hatred for their line is no less. But if your sister's ghost demands this, then so be it." Ned closed his eyes briefly, feeling a knot loosen in his chest. It was not perfect, but it was something. A chance, perhaps, to avoid more bloodshed. "Lyanna, I have tried." Jon Arryn approached Ned, resting a hand on his shoulder. "It is good that this was brought to light. Perhaps now we can steer the king's policy carefully and avoid rash decisions." He turned to Robert. "Your Grace, we must still address other concerns, rebellions in the Iron Islands, unrest in the Dornish border territories. Peace is always precarious." Robert exhaled wearily as though his anger had drained him. "Then let us see to it, Jon. But do not be surprised if the Targaryens' existence troubles my sleep." He waved a hand dismissively. "You are both dismissed. I have no taste for more talk of Rhaegar or his spawn today. I need a moment alone." Ned and Jon exchanged glances. They bowed and departed, leaving the king to brood. Outside, in the corridor, Ned drew in a long, shaky breath. Jon Arryn walked beside him, his gait measured. "I never knew Lyanna well," Jon said softly, "but from what I heard, she had a fiercely gentle heart, loyal, spirited. It seems she wanted a kinderworld." Ned could only nod, remembering how she smiled at him in the winter courtyard, how her laughter rang out among falling snow. "She did," he said. "But in this world, softness is often a weakness. I only hope Robert's concession will last." Jon gave a thoughtful hum. He loved her in his own way. That love may stay his hand more than any argument or threat. Then the older man paused at an intersection of corridors. "Remember, Ned, we must remain vigilant. The court can be as dangerous as a battlefield. You've just pried open an old wound in Robert's heart, and not everyone here will be sympathetic. Some might whisper that you harbor Targaryen sympathies yourself, especially the Lannisters." Ned frowned. "Let them whisper. My honor is known. If they would make a foe of me for wanting peace, so be it." Jon's gaze flickered with the faintest worry. "Be careful," he said. "There are more cunning men in King's Landing than you and I. We must ensure none twist this situation to their advantage." Ned offered a small nod. "Thank you, Jon, for standing with me." Jon Arryn inclined his head, patted Ned's arm once more, and departed down the corridor. Left alone, Ned felt the quiet hush of the castle envelop him. He was tired, more tired than he had been even at the height of the rebellion. Secrets weighed on him like stones in his pockets, threatening to drag him under. But the course was set. He had revealed Lyanna's wish to the king. The rest would unfold as fate decreed. That evening, Ned found himself in the Godwood. King's Landing's Godwood was a pale imitation of the ancient forest in Winterfell. The heart tree here was but a weirwood sapling, young and slender, its carved face faint and unweathered. But it was the closest thing he had to the north in this southern city of sun-baked stone. He knelt by the pool that reflected moonlight and prayed, though he did not speak the prayers aloud. He prayed to the old gods to guide Robert's heart, to keep the realm from another war. He prayed for the child he had hidden away, for his own family, for Lyanna's soul. Footsteps rustled behind him, and he turned to see Catelyn. She wore a dark cloak against the evening breeze, her face drawn with worry. "Ned," she said gently, "I was told you came here." He rose and offered his hand. She took it, her fingers warm. "I had to clear my head," he murmured. "The CIT. Wise noise is too much for me sometimes." She tilted her head, studying him. "You have spoken with the king?" "Aye. A difficult conversation." He glanced away. "I told Robert something I had long held back about Lyanna. It may change matters." Catelyn's brow furrowed. "Change matters how?" Robert had planned to continue pursuing any surviving Targaryens, to wipe them out completely. "I told him of Lyanna's last wish, that the killing end. For the moment, he has agreed not to send men across the sea to murder children in exile." Ned's voice shook, half from relief, half from lingering fear. "He is not happy about it. He is wrestling with his hatred." Catelyn stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. Her touch was tender, her gaze compassionate. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "If your sister asked it of you, how could you refuse? That is the Ned I know and love, the man who holds honor dear." Her words soothed him, though guilt still prowled in his heart. "I only hope it does not lead to disaster. Robert's mercy is grudging and might not last." If the Targaryens appear a threat, he will strike. Catelyn nodded. And you must be prepared. If that time comes, you will have to decide how far your promise to your sister extends. Ned looked at the slender branches of the weirwood swaying gently in the wind. How far indeed? He had not told Robert the full truth that Lyanna had given birth to Rhaegar's child, that the child was hidden in plain sight, that Ned had claimed the boy as his own bastard, named him Jon Snow. To breathe the truth would be to invite the king's wrath upon them all. Jon was safer as a nameless, motherless Snow in Winterfell than as the rightful heir of Rhaegar Targaryen. So Ned's promise continued to coil around him. He hoped he would never need to make that choice, but if it came down to it, he would protect his nephew. Lyanna's last words demanded it. Catelyn could see the conflict in his eyes, but she did not press. She merely squeezed his hand and led him out of the godwood. They walked together, side by side, returning to the Tower of the Hand under the moonlit sky. The day had been long, and there would be more trials yet to come. Rumors spread quickly through the court. The king's hand had vexed Robert with talk of Targaryens, and the king now paced the Red Keep in brooding silence. Whispers flew in every corridor, behind every tapestry, in every courtyard, that Ned Stark counseled compassion for the very house that nearly destroyed them. That Lord Stark was a northern fool naive about the dangers of Dragon's Pawn. Or that he harbored a secret fondness for the Targaryens, a traitor's sympathy. Littlefinger, with his sly humor, never missed an opportunity to sow confusion. "Ah, our dear Lord Stark," he might say in passing, so full of honor he'd sooner hug a scorpion than crush it. You can almost respect such a charitable nature, almost. Varys, meanwhile, watched with his usual unblinking interest, neither condemning nor condoning, but filing every detail away behind those soft, powdered hands. Within days, Ned felt the tension grow. He noticed how certain lords gave him colder greetings and how Queen Cersei's stare lingered on him with something close to contempt. She, like Robert, had no love for Targaryens. But unlike Robert, she might see advantage in stoking that hatred or manipulating it to her own ends. Finally, word came that the king wished for a smaller council meeting to discuss the Targaryen question. Ned entered the council chambers to find Robert, Jon Arryn, Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Grand Maester Pycelle, Varys, Littlefinger, and Ser Barristan and Selmy gathered. Cersei was not present, though Ned did not doubt she would pry out every detail. Robert greeted him with a curt nod. "We are here to settle the matter of these Targaryen whelps once and for all. I have heard conflicting advice, and I will have order. Let each of you speak your counsel, and then I will decide." Ned's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He took a seat at the long table. Jon Arryn sat beside him, offering a measured smile of encouragement. Stannis was the first to speak in his stern, unyielding manner. "Your Grace, as Lord of Dragonstone, I know too well the power the Targaryens once wielded. Their name alone can rally dissenters. Daenerys and Viserys remain a threat to your reign, no matter how small their following might be at present. They should be eliminated quietly but decisively." Renly, flamboyant in a green velvet doublet, shrugged. "Are they truly so dangerous, brother? A beggar king with his sister in some Essosi city, scrounging for coin? I doubt it. They are more nuisance than threat." Stannis bristled at Renly's nonchalance. Nuisances have a way of growing if left unchecked. Littlefinger's smile was a lazy curve. "True, but kings have more pressing concerns. War is expensive. Sending assassins across the sea, bribing triarchies, or Dothraki horse lords, it all costs gold. Gold that might be better spent securing alliances here in Westeros. If the Targaryens do muster an army someday, well, that is someday. We can address it then." Varys's voice was as gentle as a whisper of silk. "A prudent approach can save lives. We have watchers across the sea. If Viserys or Daenerys gain allies, we will know. Until then, it might be wise to refrain from open hostility that could garner them sympathy." Pycelle cleared his throat. "It is the crown's duty to maintain stability. The Targaryens have a rightful claim, as some might see it, to the Iron Throne. It is an inconvenient truth, but truth nonetheless. As the king, your grace, you must weigh how best to preserve your legitimacy. Mercy might be seen as weakness, but an overzealous pursuit might appear cruel." Robert listened with furrowed brow, arms folded across his chest. "Ser Barristan," he said at last. "You fought alongside me at the Trident, that you served the Mad King once. What say you?" Ser Barristan, in his white cloak, inclined his head. "I say that children should not pay for the sins of their fathers, your grace. And that sometimes a king shows his greatness through mercy, not bloodshed." Robert's glare shifted to Ned. "And you, Ned? You have the strongest feelings on this matter, apparently." Ned spoke with quiet resolve, aware that every eye was upon him. "I stand by what I said. If you slay children abroad who have done no harm, you will breed resentment. There are still those in Westeros who remember the Targaryens fondly. By letting them be, you demonstrate that you are not a tyrant who kills out of fear. Lyanna. He stopped himself. He had almost invoked her name again. He tried to gather composure. Lyanna would not have wanted more innocent blood spilled, he finished, letting Robert fill the unspoken gap. A frosty silence. Stannis's mouth pressed into a thin line, disapproval evident. Littlefinger watched with that infuriating half-smile. Renly looked mildly entertained, as though the whole matter were a curious drama. Varys's fingers steepled thoughtfully. Jon Arryn's expression was firm, supportive. Robert sighed, a ragged sound. Very well. I have heard enough. We shall not dispatch assassins at this time. If the Targaryen girl is wed to some powerful khal or prince, if they muster an army, then we act. But I will not squander coin or blood chasing phantom threats. Let them scrounge in the east. They will find no welcome here. Ned bowed his head slightly. Ser Barristan inclined his as well. Stannis looked ready to argue, but Robert shot him a glare. This is decided, the king said in a tone that brooked no dispute. We have other matters to address, such as Balon Greyjoy's recent defiance and the gold in our coffers or lack thereof. He shot a withering look at Littlefinger. The meeting moved on, but Ned felt a cautious relief. Robert had chosen a path of restraint, albeit grudgingly. Perhaps for now the realm would remain at peace. Lyanna's wish was being honored, if only in a partial manner. Yet as the council continued, Ned could sense tensions beneath the surface. Stannis was not pleased. And no doubt powerful families in the realm, like the Lannisters, would have their own views. Peace in King's Landing was a fragile thing indeed. That night, Ned met a messenger from the north. The man had arrived with news from Winterfell. He was a grizzled rider loyal to House Stark, carrying updates about the harvest, the condition of Ned's children, and other day-to-day matters. Ned's heart lifted at hearing of his children's well-being, Robb growing fast, Sansa learning her courtesies, Arya refusing to be confined by Leda-like pursuits, Bran climbing every wall he could find, and Rickon toddling about. And, of course, there was Jon Snow, the quiet boy who still shadowed Robb in lessons. Jon, Lyanna's son. Alive, healthy, safe in Winterfell. Whenever Ned allowed himself to think too deeply on it, sorrow and love intertwined in his chest. If the truth were ever known, if Robert learned that the Targaryen line was not merely across the sea but in the north under Ned's protection, the king's leniency might vanish in an instant. He would see Jon's blood spilled. Ned read the messenger's letters in silence, letting the man rest in the courtyard. He could almost picture Winterfell's great halls, the comforting hush of the crypts, the wolf's head banners waving in northern wind. He missed it terribly. But for now his duty was in King's Landing. He offered the messenger hospitality and instructed him to depart on the morrow with fresh missives for Maester Luwin. The messenger bowed, leaving Ned alone in the flickering torchlight. He stood there, lost in thought, until he sensed another presence behind him. He turned to see Varys, silent as a cat, his soft slippers making no sound on the stone. The Master of Whisperers smiled demurely. Lord Stark, Varys said, dipping his head in a bow that was more mocking than respectful. Burning the midnight oil, I see. Ned regarded him warily. Do you make it a habit to prowl the castle at all hours? I make it a habit to be of service, my lord. Information never sleeps. Varys glanced at the letters in Ned's hand. News from the north, I presume? I trust your family is well. Ned stiffened. He did not trust Varys, though he recognized the man's utility. Yes, they are well, he replied curtly. Varys folded his hands. It is good that you have such blessings in these trying times. One never knows how quickly fortune can turn. The realm is not always kind. Do you have something you wish to say, Lord Varys? Ned asked, his patience fraying at the edges. Varys pressed his lips in a neutral smile. Only that the court is astir about your revelation to the king. Whispers abound. Some say you are letting sentimentality cloud your judgment, or that you might even harbor Targaryen sympathies. I, of course, am not one to indulge in idle gossip. Ned's jaw tightened. I stand by what I have done. Indeed. And the king for now has chosen to heed you. Varys's gaze flicked to the courtyard, where a single torch guttered in the breeze. But you must know there are others who might use this to undermine you. Some lords favored a more decisive stance. Stannis Baratheon is known for his unyielding sense of justice. He believes the Targaryens must be dealt with harshly. He may see your advice as weakness. I do not fear Stannis, Ned said, nor any man who believes slaughter is the only solution. Varys's expression was difficult to read in the dim light. And yet, men will do terrible things if they believe it is for the good of the realm. Or for their pride. If, say, there was some rumor that a Targaryen lived in the north, hidden by a noble lord. That is enough, Ned snapped, his anger flaring. If you have a point, speak it plainly. Varys bowed apologetically. I mean no offense, my lord. I only wish for you to be cautious. That is all. Rumors can take shape from the most fleeting shadows, and the consequences can be dire. Ned glared at him. I will keep that in mind. Do, Varys replied softly. Good night, Lord Stark. He glided away, leaving Ned's heart pounding. The man's insinuations made him uneasy. How much did Varys suspect about Jon? He had eyes everywhere, or so the whispers claimed. Ned inhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain calm. Even if Varys suspected, he had no proof. And if he intended to use that rumor as leverage, well, Ned would deal with that when the time came. For now, he had no choice but to remain vigilant. Days bled into weeks. Robert attempted to move on from the Targaryen issue, immersing himself in hunts, feasts, and the more mundane tasks of kingship. He laughed raucously when in his cups, but at times Ned would catch him staring moodily into space, as if haunted by old ghosts. Stannis returned to Dragonstone, carrying out his duties as master of ships. The tension between Ned and certain factions in the Red Keep lingered, but no open confrontation arose. Cersei grew colder in her interactions with Ned. You Northmen are all so honorable, she said once with a sneer, that you'd let a viper slither free if it whispered a sob story in your ear. She spoke in the safety of her solar, with only a few Lannister guards present. Ned answered her as calmly as he could, refusing to be baited, and she ended the conversation with a disdainful flick of her hand. Littlefinger continued to toy with him in conversation, dropping hints about pet dragons and long-lost heirs, but always couching them in jokes. Ned recognized that the man was testing him, probing for weaknesses. He tried to remain stoic, offering nothing. One afternoon, as Ned oversaw a minor dispute in the throne room, Robert abruptly announced he would go hunting in the Kingswood for several days. I need fresh air, the king proclaimed, and something to kill. He insisted on leaving the governance in Ned's capable hands. The small council bowed to the decision, though Ned suspected that Robert merely wished to avoid the stifling heat of the capital, and perhaps the memories that roiled through his mind. As the king and his hunting party departed, Ned found the Red Keep strangely subdued. He spent the daylight hours in the Tower of the Hand, reviewing documents on taxes, roads, and garrison reports. At dusk, he dined with Catelyn. She noticed the tightness in his shoulders and urged him to rest, but rest was hard to come by. Late on the second night of Robert's absence, Ned was awakened by frantic pounding on his door. He stumbled from bed, still in his nightclothes, to find a panicked courtier babbling about an emergency small council session. Ned dressed hastily, strapped on his sword belt, and hurried to the council chambers, dreading what news might greet him. He arrived to find Varys, Peter Baelish, Pycelle, and Renly already assembled. Jon Arryn was not present, which struck Ned as odd. Ser Barristan stood solemnly near the door. The flickering candelabras cast wavering shadows on the walls, adding to the sense of sudden crisis. What has happened? Ned demanded, scanning the room. Varys' expression was grim. There has been an incident, my lord. Lord Arryn, he collapsed in his chambers this evening, coughing blood. The maesters are attending him now. Ned's stomach dropped. Jon Arryn. Is he? Littlefinger's lips pursed. Not dead yet, but in grave condition. Pycelle has just come from him. Pycelle nodded gravely. I fear for his life, Lord Stark. His breathing is labored, his face pale. He is muttering incoherently about secrets, I fear. Secrets he discovered. Renly cleared his throat. He has been studying some volumes in the library regarding lineage. Something to do with bastard lines, I believe. I do not know the details. Ned felt a chill run through him. Jon Arryn, the father figure who had guided Robert, who had fostered Ned and Robert both, now lay dying. And apparently he had been investigating something about lineages or bastards. Could it be connected to the Targaryens? Or something else entirely? Could he have been poisoned? Ned asked, voice low. Pycelle stroked his long white beard. It is too early to say with certainty. The symptoms could match a natural ailment. But we shall not discount foul play. Varys interlaced his fingers. We must handle this delicately. If Lord Arryn dies while the king is away, it could cause turmoil. He is the king's oldest friend and a revered figure in the realm. Ned's mind spun. He recalled Jon Arryn's parting words cautioning him about the dangers in King's Landing, about cunning foes who would twist secrets. Had Jon discovered something that threatened powerful interests? Something worth killing for? He cleared his throat. I would see him at once. Pycelle bowed. Of course, my lord. I shall escort you. Renly's face was drawn. Shall I send riders to inform the king? Ned hesitated, then shook his head. Let us first see if Lord Arryn recovers. Sending word now might cause Robert to return in haste and alarm. We can send for him if matters worsen. No one seemed particularly satisfied by that, but neither did they argue. Varys and Littlefinger both cast unreadable glances at each other. Ser Barristan kept silent, but Ned could see a glimmer of concern in his eyes. They dispersed. Ned followed Pycelle down a winding corridor to Jon Arryn's chambers. Outside stood Lysa Arryn, Jon's wife, trembling as she wrung her hands. She looked up as Ned approached, tears streaking her cheeks. He is so pale, she whispered. He keeps saying our boy, our boy. Ned comforted her as best he could, then stepped inside with Pycelle. The chamber smelled of sickness. The once robust Jon Arryn lay on a bed, sheets stained with flecks of blood. Maesters hovered, placing damp cloths on his brow, trying to ease his labored breathing. At the sound of footsteps, the old man's eyes flickered open. Ned, Jon rasped, voice weak, barely audible. Ned, my boy. Ned knelt by the bed, heart clenched in sorrow. I am here, my lord. Jon's gaze was feverish, darting around as though seeking something. The seed is strong, he murmured. But not always. Not always. Rhaegar, Lyanna. The child. Shoo. He coughed wetly, eyes rolling. Beware the th, he retched, a spasm of pain contorting his features. Ned gently gripped Jon's hand. Rest, my lord. Don't speak. He saw the terror and urgency in the man's eyes, the desperate attempt to impart knowledge before it was too late. Jon gasped again, then sagged back, unconscious. The maesters exchanged grim looks. One applied another cloth to his brow, while another tried to spoon some concoction between his lips. None of it seemed to help. Jon was lost in delirium. Ned stood, the blood pounding in his temples. Rhaegar, Lyanna, the child. Jon Arryn had known more than Ned realized. Or suspected. Was he referring to the rumor of Targaryen heirs or the bastardy matter he had been investigating? The seed is strong, that cryptic phrase had been repeated. And beware the what? The throne? The Lannisters? The secrets? Ned did not know. Pycelle's voice broke through his reverie. He may not survive the night, my lord. We do all we can, but the gods must decide now. Ned's heart sank. He bowed his head. I will stand vigil. Pycelle hesitated, then sighed. Very well. Lady Lysa should rest as well, but she refuses to leave her husband's side. I will prepare more potions. Ned took a seat in a chair near the bed, watching as Jon Arryn's chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. Memories swirled, the old man's gentle but firm instruction when Ned was a ward in the Eyrie, his patience, his sense of justice. Jon Arryn had been a second father, a guiding light. Now he lay dying, possibly from poison. And what did he know about Lyanna and Rhaegar's child? Could it be that he suspected Jon Snow's true parentage? Ned felt a tremor of fear. If Jon Arryn had discovered that secret, who else might have gleaned it? The timing of his sudden collapse was too suspicious. Perhaps someone who feared he would reveal that knowledge had arranged his demise. Ned stayed in that chamber for hours, the candles burning low. Lysa hovered, weeping quietly. The maesters came and went, administering futile treatments. Jon Arryn's fever spiked, and he tossed and moaned. At one point, his eyes opened, and he looked at Ned, tears glistening. Lyanna was, she wanted peace, he breathed. Ned squeezed his hand, but Jon slipped into delirium again. When dawn's first light touched the windows, Jon Arryn was dead. The shock rippled through King's Landing like a thunderclap. Jon Arryn, hand of the king for many years, the man who helped seat Robert on the Iron Throne, was gone. Lysa Arryn was inconsolable. Within a day, she gathered her son, the young Robert Arryn, and fled to the Eyrie before Ned could stop her, leaving behind a swirl of questions. People whispered that she feared for her own life, that she suspected her husband's fate was no accident. Robert Baratheon returned from his hunt in a black fury. He marched into the Red Keep, raging about his friend's death. He demanded answers from Pycelle, from Varys, from everyone in reach. When told that illness claimed him, Robert cursed the gods for their cruelty. But there was doubt behind his eyes. A part of him sensed something deeper at play, some hidden threat he could not name. Ned attended Robert in the throne room that evening. The king slumped on the iron throne, lines of grief etched into his face. "He was like a father to me," Robert said, voice heavy. "I loved him more than my own father. Now the realm is robbed of his wisdom." Ned bowed his head. "He was a great man. We must find the truth of what happened." Robert grimaced. "I'll name a new hand soon. Some urge me to pick Tywin Lannister, but God's help me, I have enough Lannister influence around me already. I want a man I trust." "That man is you, Ned." Ned stared, a lump in his throat. He had never desired power or position only to protect his family and uphold his honor. But the king was asking him to fill Jon Arryn's place. "Your Grace." "You are the only one I can count on," Robert insisted. "Take it. You served as my hand in all but name these past months. Make it official." Ned closed his eyes briefly, recalling the weight of the responsibilities, the secrets, the intrigue. But how could he refuse? Jon Arryn had died, possibly murdered for secrets that brushed close to Ned's own. If Ned left now, who would stand for the realm's welfare and keep the promise to Lyanna alive? He opened his eyes and nodded slowly. "I will serve my king." Robert managed a grim smile. "Then it is done." He looked away, swallowing thickly. "I would rather have my friend alive than a new hand, but the gods have taken him. I must do what is best for the realm." Ned took a breath. "I will find the truth behind his death. If anyone is responsible, I will see them brought to justice." Robert scowled. "Aye, do that. And do not let this talk of Targaryens distract you from what must be done at home." He stood, sweeping down from the throne. "I'm off to drink until I can't feel. 7 hells, Ned, I hate this cursed business of ruling." He stalked off. Ned watched him go, heartsick for his friend's grief and for the father figure he had lost as well. But overshadowing his sadness was a cold determination. Jon Arryn had known something worth killing for. Whether it was the matter of the Targaryen heirs across the sea or the truth about Jon Snow, Ned intended to uncover it. He silently vowed to see that justice was done, in the name of House Stark, in the name of the vow he had sworn to Lyanna, and in memory of the man who had brought him and Robert together. The realm was on the edge of a knife, balanced between old grudges and new revelations. Ned Stark stood at the center of the storm, holding a promise that could reshape the fate of kings. If he succeeded, perhaps Lyanna's wish would finally come to pass, peace, not built on fear or hatred, but on understanding and mercy. If he failed, the 7 kingdoms might drown anew in blood. In the fortnight that followed, Ned took up the mantle of Hand openly. Ravens flew throughout the realm to announce Lord Stark as the new Hand and to summon lords to reaffirm their fealty under the changed leadership. Catelyn remained by his side, though he urged her to consider returning to Winterfell to watch over the children. She hesitated. The memory of Jon Arryn's sudden death frightened her, and she feared leaving Ned alone in a den of vipers. Yet for now she stayed, reluctant to part from him in this uncertain time. Meanwhile, Robert struggled with his grief. He lost himself in feasts or hunts, returning to the Red Keep only to sign edicts or bellow at the council. Cersei wore a mask of stoic calm, but behind her green eyes burned a calculated fire. As for Stannis, he sent a curt letter of condolence from Dragonstone, neither offering additional sentiments nor visiting King's Landing. Renly hovered at court, charming as ever, though a hint of restlessness lay beneath his jests. Ned delved into Jon Arryn's affairs, determined to pick up the trail of the man's final investigation. He pored over the books on lineage that Jon had examined. They were dry tomes listing genealogies of various houses. At first, Ned could see nothing significant. The Targaryens, of course, had a detailed ancestry within those volumes, but so did other great houses. Why would that kill him? He found a scrap of parchment tucked among Jon's personal notes, a single sentence, "The seed is strong," beneath which Jon had scribbled references to Baratheon: black hair, black eyes, tall stature. Ned frowned, thinking of how Robert and all his recognized bastards had the hallmark Baratheon look, dark hair, robust build. The seed is strong. But Cersei's children, Ned's mind flashed to a memory. The young Prince Joffrey was fair-haired, green-eyed, more resembling a Lannister than a Baratheon. A cold realization coiled in Ned's stomach. Jon Arryn had studied the lineage of House Baratheon only to find a discrepancy. Every Baratheon in recorded history was dark of hair, yet Joffrey was not. Nor was Tommen, nor Mosella. All 3 were undeniably fair-haired, like the Lannisters. Suddenly Ned understood. If Robert's children were not truly his, if they were the product of an incestuous liaison between Cersei and her brother Jaime, that would mean Joffrey was not the rightful heir. That would upend the succession and indeed the entire realm. It could start a war if revealed. He stared at the note, heart hammering. Was this the secret Jon Arryn had died for? And yet, how did it connect to the question of the Targaryens? perhaps only tangentially. But if Robert discovered his children were not his own, the realm's stability would be shattered. The Lannisters would do anything to keep that secret. Poisoning Jon Arryn to silence him would be a trifling matter, no doubt. Ned leaned back in his chair, mind reeling. If the royal children were bastards, Robert had no true heirs unless one counted Targaryens across the sea or a secret Targaryen in Winterfell. Lyanna's child, Jon Snow, was the last living link of Rhaegar's line. If Robert learned of his own cuckoldry and discovered the truth of Jon, the realm would be thrown into utter chaos. Cersei might move to protect her children by any means, and Robert's hatred for Targaryens might rekindle, turning him against Ned. His vow to Lyanna had become more perilous than ever. He had sworn to protect Jon, to ensure the realm found peace. But how could peace be maintained in the face of royal betrayal? If Ned let this knowledge fester, he was complicit in a lie that undermined the monarchy. If he revealed it, war might erupt. He closed his eyes. He could almost hear Lyanna's voice, telling him to protect her son, to spare innocence from the fires of vengeance. He had forced Robert to adopt a fragile restraint toward the Targaryens across the sea, but would that restraint hold if the throne itself was threatened from within? There was no easy answer. Only the knowledge that events were moving swiftly toward a confrontation that might rip the realm apart. Ned swore to himself that he would do everything in his power to keep his sister's wish alive, a peace that spared innocence, a respite from the endless cycle of hatred. If that meant confronting Robert or the Lannisters or any power that threatened to plunge the realm into bloodshed again, then so be it. He was Eddard Stark, sworn to protect the living legacy of his sister and to honor the memory of the friend he had just lost. He would follow that path, come what may. Days later, word reached Ned that Robert intended to host a grand tournament in honor of the new hand. Ned cringed at the thought. Such spectacles cost exorbitant sums, and the crown was already in debt. But Robert cared little for coin when it came to revels. He needed distraction, a show of royal splendor to drown his grief and reassert his power. Nobles across the land would flock to King's Landing to compete for the champion's purse. Privately, Ned feared that the influx of lords and knights, each with their own agendas, would only add fuel to the conspiracies simmering in the capital. He thought of Cersei, who might see the gathering as an opportunity to test or bribe allies. Of Littlefinger, who would be betting lavishly on the justs while gleaning secrets from every corner. Of Varys, who might use the crowds for his own labyrinth of informants. And of any hidden Targaryen sympathizers who might slip into the city, seeking a chance to stir trouble. Yet Ned could not deny the king. He began preparing for the event, securing lodging for the influx of guests, coordinating with the Master of Coin to fund the prizes, and ensuring the City Watch was ready to keep order. All the while, the secret about the royal children and the memory of Jon Arryn's final words weighed heavily on him. He wanted more proof before making any move. He had begun discreet inquiries, visiting blacksmiths' apprentices rumored to be Robert's bastards, noticing each had the Baratheon stamp of dark hair. He compared them in his mind to Prince Joffrey's fair locks. He found no variation from the pattern. The Baratheon seed was indeed strong, so why was it absent in the royal heirs? One afternoon, after a long meeting with the city's guild representatives, Ned left the council chambers to find Robert waiting for him outside, alone. The king motioned for him to follow. They made their way to a secluded garden balcony overlooking the city. The smell of blooming flowers mingled with the stench of the distant streets. Robert leaned against the marble railing, looking out at King's Landing's sea of rooftops. "I remember when we took this city," he said quietly. "The riots, the bodies, the chaos after the Mad King fell. Jon Arryn was my rock then, guiding me through the worst. Now he's gone. Sometimes I think this city is cursed. Too many ghosts." Ned joined him at the railing. "It weighs on all of us." Robert's voice grew bitter. "Cersei says I should let it go, that these things happen. Easy for her to say. She didn't lose a man who was like a father. She has no fondness for the old families who supported the rebellion." He paused, glancing at Ned. "I've been thinking about what you told me regarding Lyanna's wish. I still feel Rhaegar's shadow in every corner, cursing me from beyond. But for you, I've kept my peace about those dragon spawn across the sea." Ned bowed his head. "I am grateful, Your Grace. It was never my intent to pain you only to honor her memory." Robert nodded wearily. I know. But the realm is a viper's nest. With Jon Arryn gone, I feel blind. I sense something stirring. I can't name it. You might be the only one I can trust to see me through. Ned could not hold back. Then let me ask you, Robert. Trust me enough to answer something truthfully. Are you certain Joffrey is your son? The words tumbled out before he could stop them. He had not meant to confront Robert so directly, but the question clawed at him. Robert rounded on him, eyes narrowing. What in the seven hells are you implying? Ned took a breath. I have concerns. A question of appearance of blood. Every Baratheon in your line bears certain traits. The prince? By the gods, Ned, Robert growled, fists clenched. You dare question my wife's fidelity? My children's parentage? Ned's gut twisted. He saw the raw danger in Robert's eyes, the pride of a king who would not brook an insult to his heirs. Yet he had come too far to lie now. I question what Jon Arryn may have discovered. He was reading about your house's lineage, and he died for it. Perhaps he uncovered some dreadful truth. A storm of emotions raged on Robert's face, fury, fear, confusion, sorrow. He was always so damned honorable. If he suspected something so monstrous, he would have come to me. Not hide in books. Not die for it. Unless he did try to come to you and someone intercepted him, Ned said gently. He was sick so suddenly, too suddenly. Robert stepped back, fists trembling. You come to me with these vile suggestions and you expect me to listen? He turned as though to walk away, then spun back. I've betted Cersei fathered those children. They are mine. If you ever breathe a word otherwise, I will— His voice broke off, replaced by ragged breath. Ned's throat was dry as sand. Forgive me, your grace. I speak only out of concern. If Joffrey is truly your seed, then I am relieved. But consider the possibility. If the Lannisters are deceiving you, the realm is in peril. House Baratheon is in peril. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. Then he hissed, I will hear no more of this. I am your king, and I forbid you to speak of it again. Ned swallowed his protest. He bowed stiffly. As you command. Robert turned away, his broad back rising and falling with angry breaths. After a moment, he stomped off, leaving Ned alone on the balcony, heart pounding. He had tested their friendship with that question, perhaps even shattered it. But he could not pretend ignorance. If the king refused to see, Ned had to find a way to protect the realm from the truth that might erupt at any moment. He stood there, gazing at the sprawl of rooftops, thinking of how fragile the realm's peace truly was. Robert's reign rested on illusions, his illusions of fatherhood, of the realm's unity, of the Targaryen threat subdued. If any one thread was pulled, the entire tapestry might unravel into chaos. And in the midst of it all, a child in Winterfell carried Targaryen blood, bearing the name Snow, wholly unaware of his claim to the throne. Lyanna's wish for peace teetered on a knife's edge. Ned Stark inhaled, letting the breeze cool his burning cheeks. He had taken the step Lyanna asked, to plead for peace, to protect the innocent from Robert's hatred. Now he had discovered a new and terrifying secret that might sunder the realm just as surely as any Targaryen invasion. His duty was clear, yet impossibly hard. He would have to tread carefully for the sake of his family, the realm, and the vow he had sworn so long ago. Lyanna, he murmured, voice nearly lost in the wind. I will do what I must. And he prayed the cost would not be more blood, that somehow, amidst the swirling intrigues of a broken court and an uneasy king, he could keep the realm from war, both the war that might come from within if Robert learned the full truth of his own heirs, and the war that might come from beyond if Targaryen exiles rose to claim the Iron Throne. Between these twin perils, he was but one man, bound by honor and love. But he was also a Stark of Winterfell, and Starks never yielded to the storm. For Lyanna's sake, for the sake of peace, he would stand firm no matter how the winds of fate howled. So the days turned, the sun rose and fell, and the realm waited, breathless, for the next page in its bloody history to be written. Ned Stark alone carried the memory of Lyanna's wish like a lonely candle in a dark corridor, hoping against hope that it would guide them all to a dawn without war. And if the candle flickered, if the darkness pressed in, he would shield it with his life as he once shielded a newborn child in the Tower of Joy. For that was what Lyanna had asked of him, to keep love alive even when the world demanded hate. And in his quiet, unbreakable heart, he swore that he would never let that flame die. In the week following Ned Stark's heated conversation with Robert on the balcony, the air around the Red Keep took on a palpable tension as though the castle itself was holding its breath. Courtiers and servants alike whispered of an unease they could not name. Mourning for Jon Arryn was still fresh, and a sense of warning permeated the corridors, growing stronger by the day. In the midst of it all, the king's announcement of a grand tournament in honor of Lord Stark's elevation to hand seemed a jarring contrast, a lavish spectacle arranged against a backdrop of uncertainty and grief. Yet Robert insisted and none dared contradict him. Ned tried to busy himself with the day-to-day requirements of ruling. Hearing petitions in the throne room, reviewing the city watch's readiness for the influx of visitors, discussing tax levies and tournament expenses with an ever-smirking Peter Baelish. He did so with grim determination, knowing that each task carried him further into a mire of intrigue. His nights were spent poring over the late Jon Arryn's papers, looking for clues. The phrase, "the seed is strong," echoed in his thoughts, circling endlessly, accompanied by the memory of Joffrey's golden hair. He had touched a raw nerve in Robert by suggesting Joffrey might not be his. Such a confrontation threatened the fragile truce over Targaryen questions as well, for the surest way to reignite Robert's old hatred was to leave him feeling betrayed. Ned still clung to Lyanna's plea for peace, but now, ironically, a hidden truth about the Baratheon lineage posed a danger that might even surpass rumors of Targaryen heirs in exile. If Robert realized that the line he had established was false, the consequences would be staggering. Ned found little comfort in sleep. Night after night, his dreams were filled with echoing voices: Lyanna's frail whisper in a tower room, Jon Arryn's delirious muttering, Robert's roar of outrage, the silent eyes of a weirwood tree. He would wake in a sweat, sometimes to find Catelyn sitting up beside him, worry etched in her face. "Speak to me, Ned," she would urge softly, taking his hand in hers. "I fear I'm losing you to shadows I cannot see." He wanted to tell her the whole truth, but he had once kept Jon Snow's parentage from her, and that secret had become the keystone of his life. Now there was another monstrous secret, one that might shatter the royal family and drag them all into war. And so he would only sigh, brush a strand of auburn hair from her brow, and murmur, "I am burdened by the memory of too many dead." It was not false, merely incomplete, and Catelyn would gaze at him with pained understanding. She knew well that Ned carried old wounds from the rebellion, and she had grown used to the stoic hush that closed around him. Whenever Lyanna's name was spoken, he found fleeting respite in the godswood. The young weirwood tree, there was no ancient sentinel like the one in Winterfell, yet kneeling before it brought him some measure of solace. He would close his eyes and breathe in the damp scent of leaves and earth, offering silent prayers to the old gods to guide him, to preserve the North, to keep his children safe, and to steer Robert away from the madness that often lay coiled behind his bold laughter. More than once, Ned whispered Lyanna's name in these prayers, promising her that her wish for peace remained in his heart. Whether the gods heard or not, he could not say. Preparations for the tournament advanced at a rapid pace, orchestrated in large part by Littlefinger. The master of coin seemed delighted to plan every detail. The lists for jousting, the purse for the champion, the fees for city repairs in anticipation of thousands of visitors. Though Ned's first instinct was to protest the expense, Robert overruled him. "A fine distraction," the king insisted in a tone that brooked no argument. "We need good cheer after Jon's passing." Ned suspected Robert hoped the pageantry would drown out his own doubts, as well as hush the swirl of rumors that had plagued the castle. When the first foreign lords began arriving in King's Landing, the mood in the streets shifted, electrified by the promise of entertainment. Gawkers crowded every inn and alehouse, and tents sprang up in the fields outside the city walls. Jugglers and minstrels arrived in droves, hoping to capitalize on the influx of purses. The merchants were pleased, but the city watch muttered complaints about how thieves and cutpurses would slip in among the crowds. Ned doubled the number of patrols, ignoring the protests of Janos Slynt, the city watch commander, who seemed more interested in gold than in true order. Lord Baelish only smiled and said, "A busy city is a profitable city, my lord. Let the watchmen complain. They'll earn more coin in bribes anyway." Though such cynicism disgusted Ned, he had more pressing worries. Chief among them was an unexpected letter delivered one night to the Tower of the Hand. It carried a broken seal in the shape of a falcon, the sigil of House Arryn. Inside, the handwriting was shaky but unmistakably that of Lysa Arryn. She wrote only a few lines, but the urgency leapt from the page. "They murdered my lord husband," it read. "The Lannisters are behind it. Flee this place of vipers if you value your life. Keep your children safe, come to the Eyrie, where they cannot reach you." Ned's knuckles whitened around the parchment. Lysa had evidently fled King's Landing because she believed the Lannisters had murdered her husband. He had suspected the possibility of foul play, but reading such a stark accusation made it far more real. His first thought was that Lysa's fear, justified or not, would only stoke the embers of hatred in the Vale against House Lannister. And if the suspicion was true, if indeed the Queen's family had arranged Jon Arryn's death, how soon before they moved against Ned himself, if they suspected he was close to the truth? He carried that letter to Catelyn. She read it, her face paling. "She wants us to abandon King's Landing," she said in a tremulous voice. "She fears for our children." Ned nodded. "Robert insisted on naming me hand. I cannot simply cast aside that duty. And if the Lannisters truly are behind Jon's death, running away will not keep us safe. It will only invite more suspicion or push them to act more boldly." Catelyn considered, eyes full of apprehension. "She may be wrong, her grief is immense. But if she is right, you must be careful." He tucked the letter away. "I will be," he promised, though caution alone might not suffice in a nest of asps. Before returning to his duties, he set a hand on his wife's shoulder. "I think it best you go north soon, to Winterfell," he murmured. "Take Sansa and Arya, or at least Arya. Our boys are already there, safe with Maester Luwin. The less opportunity for them to be used against us, the better." Catelyn weighed his words, lips pressing into a thin line. "I will think on it. If you remain, I shall not leave you alone so easily." She put her arms around him, their embrace marked by shared fear and resolve. The next day, Ned sought to speak with Robert privately about the letter. He found the king deep in his cups in the council chamber, bellowing at Pycelle about some trifling matter. When Ned entered, Robert dismissed the Grand Maester with a drunken wave of his hand. Pycelle sputtered, bowed, and scurried out, robes sweeping behind him. "What is it?" Robert asked, half slurring his words. He reached for a flagon of wine. "More troubles, Ned? Every corner I turn, I find more gray faces muttering about doom and ruin." Ned hesitated. Perhaps it was not the best time to speak of Lysa's accusations, given Robert's state. Still, he pressed forward. "I received a letter from Lady Arryn," he said, voice low, implying that Jon Arryn was murdered. "She suspects the Lannisters." Robert lowered the flagon, eyes going narrow. "Lysa, that flighty bird. She fled in the dead of night. If she believed Jon was murdered, why run away instead of coming to me? Gods, I would have listened." His expression flickered between anger and a grief that had never fully abated. "Murdered, is it? By the Lannisters, no less. And for what?" Ned stood straighter, choosing his words with care. "I do not know. But Lady Arryn claims they arranged his death to protect some secret. Jon was investigating lineages. Baratheon lineages in particular." A muscle in Robert's jaw twitched. "Are you dredging up that nonsense again?" he demanded, a flush creeping into his cheeks. "I told you, Ned, I will hear no more accusations about my children. They are mine." Ned clasped his hands behind his back to keep them still. "I do not name them in this. I am only telling you what Lysa wrote." Robert's tension did not abate. He took another deep swig of wine, then slammed the cup down. "I love Jon like a father. If I thought for one moment he was murdered, I'd see the culprits torn apart. But these are rumors, hearsay from a hysterical widow. The last thing I need is to accuse my wife's family without proof." Ned stepped closer. "Let me find the truth. Name me your hand to look into it with discretion. If we discover Lysa is mistaken, so be it. If she is not, you have the right to demand justice." For a long moment, Robert stared at him, his face hard. Then he waved a hand, an abrupt gesture of grudging acceptance. "Fine. Snoop around if you must. But keep it quiet, I warn you. The Lannisters are proud, and Tywin commands half the gold in the realm. If he believes we're pointing fingers at him or his kin, he won't take it lightly." Ned gave a terse nod. "You have my word." Robert's gaze softened, a flicker of sorrow breaking through the anger. "I'm so tired, Ned," he muttered. "I never wanted this damned throne. I wanted Lyanna. I wanted a quiet life." He reached out, and for a moment it seemed he would grasp Ned's shoulder in camaraderie. Then he let his arm fall, as though the weight of memory was too great. "Find the truth," he repeated more quietly. "And may the gods help us if it's what Lysa says." Ned left him there, with the reek of spilled wine and grief too large for any single man. He wondered if Robert was already lamenting that he had not sought more direct vengeance on the Targaryens, or whether in some dark corner of his mind he blamed Ned for burdening him with new doubts. Either way, the path ahead was fraught with peril. But Ned was committed. In Jon Arryn's memory, in honor of the vow he had made to Lyanna, He would not let the realm sink into chaos born of lies and secret murders. He set about his investigation quietly. He spoke with the palace stewards about any irregular visitors Jon Arryn might have received in his final days. He visited the royal library in the dark hours of the night, flipping through the same family lineages Jon had consulted, looking for additional marginal notes. He spoke discreetly to some of the royal household staff who had served Lord Arryn. Many were too frightened or too loyal to the crown to say much, but a few mentioned how he had muttered about anomalies in the children's features, a detail that knotted Ned's stomach. Another servant recalled that Lord Arryn had confided in Pycelle about urgent discoveries the very night before his collapse. Pycelle, of course, denied it all, insisting Jon Arryn had seemed in good spirits until he suddenly fell ill. And so Ned, day by day, built the shape of a secret that threatened to upend the realm. The more he uncovered, the more convinced he became that Jon Arryn had learned the truth of Joffrey's paternity, and likely Tommen's and Myrcella's as well. It would explain his hurried final visits, the references to Baratheon bastards, the repeated line, "The seed is strong." As for the Lannisters, they had every reason to silence him. The question burned through Ned's mind like a fever: what to do with this knowledge? If Ned reported it to Robert outright, might the king erupt in a rage that would see his entire court drenched in blood? Or would Robert refuse to believe it, turning on Ned instead for daring to confirm his darkest fear? Either outcome threatened to tear away the delicate restraint Robert had shown concerning the Targaryens. Peace would vanish in an instant if the king's entire personal life was exposed as a lie. A king who discovered that all his children were bastards might well lash out in fury, seeking an enemy he could punish. And the exiled Targaryens, or anyone suspected of Targaryen sympathy, Ned included, would be prime targets. Worse, Ned realized that if Robert's line was proven illegitimate, the question of succession reared its head like a beast. Some might rally behind Stannis or Renly Baratheon. Others might look east to Viserys and Daenerys, true heirs of the Targaryen bloodline. And if, gods forbid, the knowledge of Jon Snow's parentage ever came to light, it would become a war of claims. In that scenario, Ned feared for every child in the land. War that magnitude would devour the realm. It was a dreadful puzzle with no easy solution, and Ned carried the pieces in his heart as the day of the tournament finally arrived. The fields outside the city had been transformed into a riot of tents and pavilions, their colorful banners snapping in a mild autumn breeze. From dawn till dusk, the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel filled the air as knights from every corner of the 7 kingdoms tested their mettle. Nobles cheered from the stands, musicians plucked lively tunes, and merchants hawked their wares. The smell of roasted meat mixed with sweat and dust, a carnival atmosphere perched on the knife's edge of tension that always accompanied knights with sharp lances and sharper pride. Robert sat in the royal box, flanked by Cersei, who wore a bored expression, and by Ned, who wore none at all. Behind them stood the king's guard in a shining line of white cloaks, Ser Barristan, and among them, his weathered face betraying no emotion. Renly lounged nearby, making jests at the expense of the more hapless Justers, while Pycelle snored quietly in a seat further down. A ring of gold cloaks and Lannister guards encircled the royal box, their presence a reminder that even at a grand festival, potential dangers lurked. The opening justs were a spectacle, well-known champions unhorsing brash newcomers, lances shattering in bursts of wood, the crowd gasping or roaring approval. Ned recognized some northern faces in the lists, lesser knights who had traveled far for a chance at glory. Others bore the sigils of the Reach, the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and Dorne. 1 or 2 from the Vale had come, but not many. The Vale was still in mourning for Jon Arryn. Lysa Arryn had refused to send any men to compete. When the first day's contests ended, Robert seemed in better spirits than Ned had seen in weeks. The king laughed raucously, jesting with Renly about the tilt that saw a knight from the Westerlands knocked flat on his back. Ned found himself clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this tournament would serve as a balm for Robert's grief and keep him from suspecting Ned's ongoing investigations. But the hope felt as fragile as spun glass. That evening there was a feast in the Red Keep's great hall, a sumptuous affair with courses of boar, venison, pastries, and rich wines. Musicians played ballads, jugglers and fools capered to amuse the highborn throng, and the tapestries seemed to glow under the light of 100 torches. Robert, in his cups, recounted old war stories to any who would listen, reliving the battles of the rebellion in a voice both proud and tinged with regret. Cersei sipped her wine, her gaze moving coldly over the revelers, never resting too long on her husband. Ned watched the queen's subtle shifts in expression. The secret that lurked beneath her painted face was a blade at his throat and at the throat of the realm. Several times, Cersei's green eyes flicked to him, sharp as knives. He wondered if she suspected how much he knew. She might have gleaned some hint from Jon Arryn's final inquiries, from Ned's own cautious questions around the castle. Yet she spoke no accusation aloud. That in itself made Ned uneasy. A direct confrontation would have been simpler. Silence meant she was planning something. After the feast, as the courtiers drifted away in pairs or clutches to their chambers, Ned stepped out onto a deserted balcony to breathe in the night air. Below, King's Landing sprawled in flickering candlelight. Torches and lanterns burned near the stables as stable boys tended the night's horses. A breeze from the Blackwater Bay carried the sense of brine and sewage, reminding Ned how the city's splendor could not hide its squalor. He sensed a presence behind him before he heard footsteps. Turning, he found himself face to face with Petyr Baelish. Littlefinger wore a thin smile as though perpetually in on some jest that eluded all others. "My Lord Hand," Baelish said, dipping his head in something resembling a bow. "Seeking solitude in the midst of our grand festivities, are we?" Ned's face remained impassive. "Sometimes a man needs quiet. And you, Lord Baelish? Did the feast lose its charm?" Littlefinger's smile broadened. "Oh, feasts never lose their charm for me. But I find that some of the most interesting conversations happen outside the crowded hall, where a man can speak plainly or as plainly as he dares." He leaned casually against the balcony's stone rail. "I understand you've been doing a bit of detective work about the late Lord Arryn. Asking questions in shadowy corners. Careful now, some corners bite back." Ned studied him, measuring each word. "I have been ensuring the realm's safety." Littlefinger let out a soft chuckle. "How noble. Still, one might wonder if your inquiries stray into dangerous territory. After all, the Lannisters are not known for their forgiving hearts. And the Queen is not a woman who tolerates interference graciously. And do you bring a warning, or is this mere gossip?" Ned asked, voice-edged. "A bit of both, perhaps. We all watch each other in King's Landing. Some of us do it for a living." He paused, his tone shifting as though confiding a secret. "There are certain truths best left undisturbed, my lord. Shaking them loose will have consequences. Blood, war, some might say that's the way of the world, but it can be profitable or costly depending on who orchestrates it." Ned's jaw set. "I am not interested in orchestrating anything but justice." Littlefinger gave a half-shrug. "Justice? A splendid notion. Fickle in practice. You must realize if you challenge the Queen, you challenge the might of House Lannister. And the King's mood is precarious at best." His eyes glittered. "But if you insist upon your course, it might be wise to keep allies close. You might find that I can be helpful." Ned allowed himself the barest flicker of skepticism. "Why would you help me?" Littlefinger patted the embroidered mockingbird on his doublet. "I help where it benefits me or where it amuses me. Sometimes both. And I do so love new ways to amuse myself in this dreary city." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Jon Arryn was a good man. Whatever he discovered or believed he discovered, he died for it. If that's murder, well, murderers are rarely content with just one kill. Let's just say I'd rather see you alive than in a grave." The bluntness of the words surprised Ned. For a moment, he wondered if Littlefinger was feigning concern to manipulate him. Petyr Baelish was not known for honesty or loyalty, save to his own ends. Still, knowledge was valuable, and if Baelish possessed knowledge about the Lannisters' doings, it might be vital. "I will consider your offer of help," Ned said at last. "But do not expect me to partake in your games." Littlefinger smiled thinly. "Oh, we are all partaking in the games, Lord Stark, whether we acknowledge it or not. I'm only offering a slight advantage in the next move." With that, he dipped his head again and withdrew into the darkness, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Left alone, Ned looked out at the city lights again. He felt more certain than ever that he trod a narrow path. One misstep could mean an avalanche of violence. He remembered Lyanna's wish, the sorrow in her eyes. "Swear to me. Don't let there be more killing." And yet, all around him, the knives were being sharpened. The second day of the tournament dawned bright and clear. Ned took his place in the royal box beside Robert, steeling himself for yet another display of martial prowess. He had once enjoyed the justs in his youth, but he found it harder to revel in them now, weighed down as he was by the secrets swirling in his mind. Still, the crowd roared with excitement as the knights took the field. Golden sunlight gleamed on polished armor, and the thunder of hooves rattled the wooden stands. One tilt pitted a fearsome knight from the Westerlands, his armor gilded with lions' heads, against a lithe young hedge knight rumored to have won a dozen smaller tourneys. The Lion Knight's lance caught the hedge knight in the shoulder, and the resulting crash spattered the dust with blood. A gasp tore through the stands. The wounded man was carried off the field, unresponsive. Ned pressed his lips into a thin line, recalling how tourneys often ended in graves. A game of splintered lances and shattered bones. But there were splendid moments too. Renly sponsored a promising new champion, a knight who wore a helm shaped like a stag's head. The man rode with skill and unhorsed an older knight from the Vale in a dazzling pass. Renly clapped and cheered, leaning toward Robert with a grin. For a heartbeat, Ned saw the flicker of a younger Robert in his brother's delight. The Robert who had once been full of unbreakable confidence, a man of simpler joys. The king managed a faint smile back. At midday, the king called a respite. Servants rushed forward with tankards of ale, trays of spiced meats, and pitchers of watered wine for the commoners. Noble spectators withdrew under tents to shade themselves from the sun. Ned found a moment of relative privacy when Robert left to relieve himself behind the stands. As Ned stepped down from the royal box, Ser Barristan Selmy moved quietly to intercept him. "My lord hand," Ser Barristan said, bowing with the formal courtesy he always showed. "Might I have a word?" Ned nodded, leading the Kingsguard knight to the side of the field where a faded canopy provided a patch of shah. "Duh." Ser Barristan's white cloak trailed across the dust. In the sunlight, he looked every inch the living legend he was said to be, though lines of age creased his face. Ned regarded him curiously. "What troubles you, Ser Barristan?" The old knight's voice was low. "I am uneasy, Lord Stark. The king has not been himself. He drinks more each day, and the queen's temper is ever fraying. There is talk of poison regarding Lord Arryn, yet no formal investigation beyond whispers. I have served 3 kings now, and I know how quickly a court can turn treacherous." Ned heard the unspoken appeal in those words. Ser Barristan was an honorable man, one who had lived through the Mad King's atrocities yet tried to remain loyal to the crown. "I share your concerns," Ned replied. "Jon Arryn's death was suspicious. I am trying to learn the truth, but caution is necessary. The king himself wants no open accusations unless I have ironclad proof." Ser Barristan nodded solemnly. "Then I beg you, my lord, be vigilant. I fear for Robert's safety. And for yours. If indeed the Lannisters were involved, they will not let their plans unravel lightly." Ned gave him a grateful look. "Your warning is heard, Ser Barristan. I intend to see justice done for Lord Arryn's sake. But I do not wish to start a war." Barristan's eyes flickered, sadness etched in every line of his weathered face. "War is a plague that can ravage generations. We have seen too many already. If your heart is set on preventing another, then may the gods guide you." Before Ned could respond, a horn sounded, summoning the spectators back to their seats for the next round of justs. Ser Barristan inclined his head in farewell and returned to his station near the royal box. Ned stood for a moment, his mind heavy with foreboding. Then he climbed the wooden steps again. Robert was already there, quaffing ale and shouting for the herald to hurry. The afternoons just passed in a blur of shattered lances. A knight of House Hightower unhorsed 2 opponents in swift succession. A Bravosi Sellsword, newly knighted for the sake of the tournament, found himself utterly outmatched by a grizzled veteran from the Stormlands. The crowd's cheers rose and fell with each clash. But Ned's attention was only half on the tilts. He scanned the faces in the stands, Varys, impassive, Littlefinger, placing wagers with quiet glee, Cersei whispering to one of her handmaidens, Pycelle blinking languidly in the heat. All seemed to swirl in a tapestry of shifting alliances. He recalled Lisa's letter, her warning that the Vipers would strike. Could they be planning something at the very tournament Robert had arranged for his own amusement? When the day's contests concluded, the final 2 knights standing were a formidable pair, a Kingsguard knight named Ser Marantrant, unpopular among the small folk for his harsh manner, and a broad-shouldered knight from the Reach known for his prowess in jousting. Robert bellowed at them to tilt immediately, eager to see a victor crowned. Despite the heat and the fatigue of the day, the 2 knights donned fresh lances and charged. The impact reverberated across the field with splinters flying. Both knights reeled but kept their seats. Another tilt. Another clash. On the 3rd pass, Ser Marantrant was driven out of his saddle, landing with a graceless thud. The stands erupted in cheers. Robert rose, leading a thunderous applause. He signaled the herald to announce the champion, who removed his helm to reveal a sweaty, triumphant grin. Flowers rained down from the stands. It was a brief moment of joy untainted by intrigues. Ned joined in the applause, mindful that Robert was watching, evidently satisfied by the spectacle. Yet as Robert's broad grin lit up his face, Ned wondered whether the man had recalled, even for a moment, that the realm might be on the brink of a deeper crisis than any jousting accident could match. By twilight, the tournament grounds were alive with music, dancing, and drinking. Bonfires crackled, casting flickering shadows. In a richly bedecked tent near the royal stands, a victory feast was underway for the champion and the notable knights who had competed. Ned was expected to attend. Robert would want to toast him as the new hand and praise the day's events. But the swirl of wine and merriment held little appeal. He forced himself to put in a dutiful appearance, raising a cup of watered wine to the champion. Across the tent he saw Cersei whispering with Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer, as ever, wore a faintly mocking smile. Ned turned away, unsettled. He was slipping out of the tent, intending to return to the Red Keep quietly when Varys materialized at his elbow, blinking his soft eyes. "Lord Stark," the eunuch murmured, "I see you're departing early. Not keen on the revelry?" "I've had enough of revelry for one day," Ned replied, curt but not hostile. He was in no mood for riddles. Varys inclined his head. "Allow me to walk with you. The grounds can be treacherous at night, and I am, as ever, a friend to all." He offered a prim little smile. Ned did not refuse. A sprawl of knights, drunk and rowdy, had begun carousing outside the tents, and he supposed it was wise to have some witness along if trouble arose. They walked past the side of the lists where torches had been extinguished except for a few near the stables. A couple of horses whickered softly. From somewhere in the dark came the faint notes of a lute. Varys kept pace, his voice low and careful. "Tell me, my lord, have you uncovered anything regarding Jon Arryn's demise?" Ned cast him a sidelong glance. "Why do you ask? Surely, if you had any intelligence, you would have already shared it." Varys gave a mournful sigh. "I serve the realm, Lord Stark. And the realm would be ill-served by discord between the crown and the great lords. If Lord Arryn was indeed murdered, the culprit aims to sow havoc." Ned considered his response carefully. If he was murdered, that culprit might be quite close to the crown. Varys pursed his lips. "You suggest the Lannisters, I gather, or so rumor says. Yet rumor is a tricky thing, like a shadow on a wall. We must be certain. If we are to accuse those who stand near the throne, we must be as sure as the sunrise." Ned stopped walking, turning to face him. "Then help me find certainty, Master of Whisperers. You claim to have little birds singing in every corner. Let them sing about Jon Arryn's final hours, who visited him, who might have slipped something in his cup." A flicker of something moved across Varys's plump face, perhaps regret or cunning. "I have made inquiries, my lord. But the trail is clouded. Maester Pycelle insists Lord Arryn was suffering from a sudden fever of the bowels, which worsened precipitously. Others speak of a particular squire who served him wine that day, but the squire has since vanished. Whispers say he took ship for Pentos within hours of Lord Arryn's death." Ned's pulse quickened. "A squire vanishes after his master's demise? That is suspicious." "Yes," Varys agreed, voice all but a breath. "But suspicion is not proof. If it was poison, the ones responsible might have left no trace. The tools of a skilled poisoner can be quite subtle." They stood in the darkness, the night around them thick with the scent of trampled grass and horse dung. Ned felt a chill creep along his spine. "I will keep searching," he said at last. "If you learn anything else, tell me." "Of course," Varys said, placing a gentle hand over his heart. "I wish for no more turmoil in our fair kingdom. Too much blood has already been shed these past years. Surely there is a way to keep the peace if we are wise." With that, he bowed and left Ned to continue his walk alone toward the Red Keep's gate, his footsteps soft as ever. Ned watched him go, uncertain whether to feel gratitude or mistrust. Likely both were warranted in equal measure. Returning to his chambers, Ned found Catelyn waiting with a letter bearing the Stark sigil. It was from Winterfell, written in Maester Luwin's measured hand. Her face was alight with relief. "Robb is doing well, and Bran and Rickon remain healthy. All is steady in the north," she said, skimming the words. "Arya and Sansa are eager to hear news of the tourney, though Sansa especially so." Ned's heart warmed briefly. To imagine Sansa's delight at the idea of courtly romance and chivalry, or Arya's excitement at the swords and lances, gave him a pang of longing for simpler days. He took the letter from her, reading it to confirm Luwin's calm reassurances that all was well in the north. But then, almost an afterthought, he reached the postscript. Maester Luwin mentioned that Jon Snow had been venturing beyond Winterfell's walls more often, riding in the Wolfswood with his uncle Benjen, who was visiting from the wall. Ned felt a strange swell of emotion. Jon Snow, the boy who was Lyanna's secret child. If the truth of that bloodline were ever discovered, it could blow the Seven Kingdoms apart. Yet in that moment Ned could only feel relief that Jon was safe, living as a Stark bastard in the north, unaware of the storms that raged in the south. He was far from Robert's resentful gaze, far from any Lannister schemes, and that alone was a mercy. Catelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "You must be tired," she said gently. "You should sleep. Tomorrow will be long as well." He drew her into a slow embrace, burying his face in her hair. "Aye," he murmured. But though his body craved rest, he doubted he would find it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a knife at Robert's back, or the Lannister lion with bloody jaws, or the cold face of a dead man's secret. He saw Lyanna, too, whispering, "Swear to me," as though her dying words still guided his every step. When at last he did lie in bed, with Catelyn's warmth beside him, sleep remained elusive. He thought of Robert's words about hating the Iron Throne, about wanting only Lyanna. A pang of guilt seized Ned. If Lyanna had chosen differently, if Rhaegar had not taken her, where would the realm stand now? Then he pictured Jon Snow as a rightful Targaryen heir, and the entire tapestry of possibility seemed to unravel. An entire generation had been shaped by the rebellion, by the tragic swirl of love, hate, and misunderstanding. Ned shut his eyes, forcing himself to let the day's events go. Dawn would bring a new wave of responsibilities. He silently prayed to the old gods to grant him wisdom enough to do what was right, for Robert, for the realm, for Lyanna's memory, and for the boy in Winterfell who might never know his true name. The next morning, Ned rose before first light. A sense of foreboding haunted him, as though the realm itself braced for a sudden blow. Dressing in plain leathers and a simple cloak, he decided to visit the city incognito with only a few guards. He had told Robert he would investigate quietly, and so he would. Despite the crowds still lingering for the tournament's aftermath, Ned knew a few places he might glean valuable whispers. He set out on foot, accompanied by Jory Castle, captain of his guard, and 2 trusted men from the north, men who had served House Stark for years. They wore neutral garb, no shining plate or sigils to mark them. The muddy streets of King's Landing greeted them with foul water and the stench of waste, vendors hawking bread and salt fish, laborers hauling supplies. The city's wide gulf between high and low never ceased to jolt Ned. Up at the Red Keep, feasts and feuds; down here, hunger and toil. Their first destination was a small potshop in Flea Bottom, a place where rumors sometimes drifted through in the form of local chatter. Ned could easily pass as a man of modest station if he kept his head down. Seated at a rough wooden table over a bowl of stew, he listened to the talk around him. Bits of gossip about whoreson knights who'd lost at the tourney, lamentations about the cost of bread, speculation about who might win in a fight between the Hound and some braggart from the Stormlands. Nothing about Jon Arryn. Nothing of a vanished squire. Ned finished his stew in silence, signaled to Jory that they would move on, and set out for the next locale. They tried a dingy wine sink near the Street of Steel, listening discreetly as apprentices boasted about forging swords for the wealthy justers. Again, no mention of suspicious circumstances or hidden murders. It seemed that if anyone had known details about Jon Arryn's final days, they were not speaking. Or they had been paid to keep quiet. By midday, the press of bodies grew too thick, so they retreated to a quieter district near the Dragonbit ruins, picking their way past rubble-strewn streets. It was there, near a dilapidated shrine, that Ned heard the rumor he had been dreading. 2 men, fishermen by the smell of them, arguing in hushed tones about a purge of Targaryen loyalists. One insisted the crown might be readying to send spies and killers across the narrow sea once more to finish the job. The other shook his head, saying he heard the king's hand. Ned Stark opposed it. That single mention made Ned's heart pound. Word had indeed spread that Eddard Stark had stayed the king's hand concerning Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. Some saw it as foolish mercy. Others saw it as prudence. Ned did not reveal himself to the 2 men, but he listened closely. It seemed they had no first-hand knowledge, only a repetition of rumor. Still, it told him that the city was abuzz with talk of Targaryens and potential infiltration. If such fear was on the lips of commoners, it could only be more intense among courtiers. He sighed. Another sign that the realm's peace hung by a thread. If Robert wavered in his new stance, or if the Targaryens made some bold move in Essos, war cries would rise anew. Ned thought of Daenerys, just a child in truth, being sold off to a Dothraki call. And Viserys, embittered, clinging to the tatters of old majesty. The image weighed on Ned's conscience. Once, Robert had wanted them all dead, babes or not. Ned had forced the king to relent, if only temporarily. But how long would that last if other calamities shook Robert's faith in his throne? In the late afternoon, he returned to the Red Keep, anxious about the lack of progress but determined not to give up. A crisp wind off the base sent a tang of salt through the courtyard as he and his men climbed the steps. Inside, courtiers bustled, each on their own errand. A page informed Ned that the king was in council with Grand Maester Pycelle and Lord Baelish. Sighing, Ned handed his cloak to a waiting servant and made his way there, Jory trailing behind at a respectful distance. He entered the council chamber to find Robert glaring over a piece of parchment, Pycelle hovering with a fretful expression, and Littlefinger wearing his usual half-smirk. As Ned closed the door behind him, Robert thrust the parchment in his direction. "Read this. From the east. Word of Targaryens again. Or so it seems." Ned took the parchment, scanning it. A report stating that Viserys Targaryen was rumored to have negotiated some arrangement with a mercenary company in Pentos. The letter's source was uncertain, but it claimed Viserys sought allies to sail to Westeros and press his claim. Another mention was made of Daenerys Targaryen wedding a Dothraki warlord. No new revelations, only a rehash of what was known. But the king's face told Ned that he was not in the mood for half measures. "Damn them," Robert growled, pacing behind the table. "Didn't you say we should let them be, Ned?" "Well, they're not staying still. I told you if they crossed the sea or raised arms, we would face them. If they land with Dothraki at their backs." Littlefinger cleared his throat. "Your Grace, the rumor says they only have the beginnings of negotiations. Nothing is confirmed. And mercenary companies are fickle. They demand gold the Targaryens do not have." Pycelle nodded, beard trembling. "Quite so, Your Grace. And the Dothraki have never been known to make sea voyages easily." Robert's glare shifted from one man to the next, then landed on Ned. "You see? They want me to be placated by these trifles. But what if it's not trifling? The smallest spark can start a conflagration. We learned that well in the rebellion." Ned kept his voice calm. "So we should be vigilant, yes? But sending assassins across the sea might only confirm the Targaryens' fears and rally support for them. If they remain in Essos and do not attack, we have no cause to shed blood needlessly." Robert muttered a curse. "You're as stubborn as you ever were, Ned." Yet there was no immediate anger in his eyes, only frustration. "Fine. We wait. But the second I hear they're crossing the narrow sea with an army, I'll strike first, before they ever set foot on my soil." "That is your right, Your Grace," Ned said, though the thought gave him no comfort. The best he could do was keep Robert in check for now, trusting that caution might avert a larger catastrophe. If Viserys was as reckless as rumor claimed, perhaps his own errors would doom him before he became a real threat. Robert threw himself into a chair, seizing a flagon of ale. "And how fares your searching about Jon Arryn's death? Any leads?" The question was blunt, laced with a challenge. Ned glanced at Littlefinger, who busied himself examining his nails, and Pycelle, who feigned ignorance. "Whispers only, Your Grace," Ned said carefully. "I speak with those who served him, but little has come to light. He was investigating the lineage of various houses, but so far I have no certainty as to why he was killed, if indeed he was." Robert squinted, rolling his shoulders. "Well, keep at it. But remember what I said, accusations without proof will tear this kingdom apart. I won't have my friend's memory used as tinder for a civil war." Ned inclined his head. "I understand." As he left the council chamber, he caught Littlefinger's eye. The Master of Coin gave him a small nod, as if to say, "We shall talk further." Ned ignored him, focusing instead on the knot in his chest. If the Targaryen exiles were stirring up trouble, Robert's patience would wear thin. And if the Lannisters sensed Ned's suspicion of their children's parentage, they might strike first. Everything was on a razor's edge. In the corridors, Ned nearly collided with Arya. She had been exploring again, it seemed, her thin face flushed with excitement. "Father," she exclaimed, scuffing her boots to a halt. "I was just, looking for the stables. I wanted to see the knight's horses." Ned gave her a gentle frown. "The stables are outside the keep, along the western yard. Did you get lost?" She bit her lip. "I might have." Then her eyes sparkled. "Did you see the justs, father? I like the champion from the Reach. But why can't girls be champions? I'd ride better than half of them." His sternness melted a fraction. Arya reminded him so much of Lyanna, sometimes fierce, willful, unafraid of convention. "It is not our custom," he said gently. "But customs can change in time." She wrinkled her nose. "I don't see why they shouldn't. The swords don't care who wields them." Then, sobering, she peered up at him. "Is everything all right, father? You seem worried." Ned placed a hand on her shoulder. "All is well enough. Come, let's find you the right path to the stables. Ser Roderick is in the courtyard, I believe. He can show you a few sword drills while you admire the horses." She brightened, letting him guide her along. For a moment as they walked, Ned felt the simplest warmth of fatherhood, being a guide, a protector, a source of reassurance for his child. Yet that warmth was tinted by the cold truth he carried. He could not shield her or any of his children from the tides that threatened to sweep them all away. The best he could do was stand firm, as Starks always did. The next few days passed in relative calm, though tension pulsed beneath the surface. Most of the knights and lords who had come for the tourney departed, leaving behind a quieter city. Robert resumed his hunts, riding out in the early mornings with a party that often included Jaime Lannister or other courtiers. Sometimes Ned would join, but often he demurred, too occupied with reading more of Jon Arryn's old ledgers or meeting with stewards who had known the dead hand's routine. Every new clue reinforced the same conclusion, that Jon Arryn had discovered something explosive about the royal children and been silenced. Ned tried not to dwell on the horror of poison. It was a coward's weapon, one that had robbed him of a mentor. If only he could find that vanished squire or identify who had introduced the poison into Jon's food or drink. But the trail was cold. Midway through the week, Ned was summoned by Queen Cersei herself. The invitation arrived on a slip of parchment sealed with the golden lion. The summons was clear: she wished to speak to the hand of the king in her solar, alone. A sense of dread pooled in Ned's stomach. He suspected what this might be about. He recalled Robert's anger when Ned had broached the topic of Joffrey's parentage. Perhaps the queen had heard some hint and meant to warn him off. Or perhaps she wanted to test him to see how much he knew. He prepared carefully, donning a plain tunic beneath a surcoat with the direwolf sigil. He took only 2 guards to the queen's apartments, leaving them outside the door when Cersei's attendants ushered him in. The solar was spacious and lavishly furnished with Myrish carpets, carved wooden screens, and airy windows that overlooked the city. Cersei stood by one of those windows, dressed in a gown of deep green that set off her golden hair. She did not turn when he entered. A hush weighed in the room. The attendants withdrew, leaving only Ned and Cersei in that ornate space, the stone walls seeming to press close. Eventually, she spoke, her voice calm, almost languid. "Lord Stark, it has been too long since we spoke privately. Come, stand by the window and admire the city with me." Ned approached, keeping a careful distance. Through the arched window, King's Landing spread out in a haze, the river glinting in the midday sun. He glanced at Cersei's profile. She was undeniably beautiful, but her features were drawn in lines of cold purpose. She flicked her gaze at him. "The city is calmer now that the tourney is over, don't you agree? Though I suspect you have been busy with other matters, your investigation, for instance." "Jon Arryn's demise." She said it lightly, as if discussing a small scandal. Ned kept his tone steady. "It is my duty to learn all I can about the late hand's affairs. The king wishes it, and so it shall be done." A slight smile curved her lips. "The king may wish many things, but not all come to pass. Sometimes the wise man knows when to leave certain truths buried." She turned fully, folding her arms. "I know what you suspect, Lord Stark. You are not as subtle as you think." Jon Arryn was not either. His heart thudded, but he held her gaze. "If you have something to say, your grace, speak plainly." She took a slow step forward. "Jon Arryn roamed the city, rummaging in secrets best left alone. He died, and perhaps you wonder if it was I who arranged it. I assure you, I did not." Her green eyes glimmered with challenge. "But if I had, could you prove it? And if you did, would Robert believe you? Do you think he would denounce his queen, the mother of his children, on your word?" Her voice took on an edge of contempt. "You northerners and your honor. You think truth alone is enough to shape the world. You are mistaken." Ned tensed. "If the truth is monstrous, it will out eventually." She let out a small laugh, though it held no real mirth. "Monstrous? And what truth is that, exactly? That I married Robert for the sake of an alliance to seal the victory of his rebellion? That he never truly loved me and I never loved him? I doubt that shocks anyone." He said nothing, conscious of the swirl of far darker truths beneath her words. She circled him, a lioness at leisure, toying with prey. "Robert hates Targaryens, doesn't he?" she said. "That's the one thing he's certain of. But you, my dear Lord Stark, have tried to turn him from that hatred. For Lyanna's sake, was it? How touching. And yet a man who hates Targaryens as fiercely as Robert is not so easily softened. Perhaps you have soothed him for a time, but all it takes is one spark to set him aflame." Ned stiffened, recalling how he had revealed Lyanna's wish for peace in that vast throne room. Lyanna did not want more innocents to die. Cersei's smile vanished. "Lyanna was as good as abducted, and your father and brother died for it. Yet you still speak of peace. How strange. Tell me, do you truly believe Rhaegar was blameless?" He felt old anger stir. "I do not condone what Rhaegar did. But that war ended a generation ago. Lyanna wanted no further bloodshed." Cersei studied him, something close to pity in her eyes. "How naive you are. Do you think Robert's war truly ended? In his mind, it wages on. He must have an enemy to fight. If not the Targaryens, then perhaps the Lannisters or you if you continue digging where you shouldn't. Ned's patience frayed. Are you threatening me, your grace? She let out a soft sigh. A warning, not a threat. You are stubborn and you fancy yourself the realm's conscience. But the realm needs more than conscience. It needs stability. If you reveal secrets that cast doubt on Robert's heirs, do you think he will calmly accept it? No, Lord Stark. He will become a beast, an injured boar lashing out at all. And war will follow. His heart pounded. She was confirming it without words, confirming that these children did not share Robert's blood. The enormity of it made him feel almost dizzy. Then you would condemn the realm to a lie. Her eyes flashed. I would save the realm from his drunken wrath, from an anarchy of uncertain succession. You do not understand how fragile Robert's hold on power truly is. The moment his line is challenged, half the realm will rise up to tear him down. The lords smell weakness, and with Targaryens rumored in Essos, do you truly want to fracture the kingdom from within? Ned forced himself to breathe calmly. You have no right to place your bastards on the throne. The throne belongs to the rightful king, and after him, to those of his blood. She stepped closer, voice dropping to a hush. Robert is no rightful anything in my eyes. He killed Rhaegar, he seized a throne, and he took me as his queen. Our arrangement keeps the realm afloat. If you or anyone else tears it asunder, you will drown in the chaos that follows. Think of your children, Lord Stark, not just your precious honor. He met her gaze, seeing in her an iron will that matched his own. Two unyielding forces clashed in that silence. Then he said, his voice low, you speak of children, yet you threaten to kill Targaryen babes if they set foot in Westeros. Is that the queenly mercy you offer? She sniffed. If they come claiming my throne, I will do what I must. I do not relish the murder of children, but I will protect my own brood at any cost. This is the game you've walked into. Tell me, do you have the stomach for it? Ned's jaw tightened. He recalled Lyanna's last breath, how she had pleaded for a kinder path. He remembered the child he had spirited away to the north, living under a false name. I will do what honor demands, he said, which includes protecting the realm from needless war. But do not mistake me. If I must reveal the truth for the sake of justice, I will. Even if it means the king must act. Cersei studied him, a look of faint sadness creeping into her eyes. I had hoped you were a more practical man. Perhaps I overestimated you. Her expression hardened again. Leave these matters be, Lord Stark. Jon Arryn did not, and he died for it. Is that a threat? He repeated, voice hoarse. She turned away, moving back to the window. A truth, however you wish to take it. This conversation is over. She raised her hand, signaling the attendants that they might re-enter. Ned stood rooted for a moment, heart pounding, anger and fear swirling in equal measure. Then he bowed, stiffly and without warmth, and departed. Outside, his guards gave him questioning looks, but he only shook his head. Something inside him felt irrevocably changed. Cersei's open admission, her cold logic, it was a glimpse of how far she would go to preserve her children's claim. And if that meant war, she would accept war. Lyanna had died for peace, yet around Ned the drums of potential conflict thundered louder each day. He returned to his own chambers, white-faced. As soon as he shut the door, Catelyn rose from a chair by the hearth, alarmed at the sight of him. Ned, what is it? He sank onto a bench, pressing a hand to his brow. The queen, he murmured. She knows I suspect her. And she has effectively confirmed the children are not Robert's. He exhaled shakily. She warned me off, said that exposing it would plunge the realm into war. Catelyn's eyes widened. Then, what do we do? Ned closed his eyes. We weigh the cost of truth. If I confront Robert with this, he might kill them all, Cersei, Jaime, the children, and blame me if the realm descends into chaos. If I keep silent, I become complicit in a lie that usurps the rightful succession. My honor, my vow to Jon Arryn's memory, they demand that I not let murder go unanswered. A tear slipped from Catelyn's eye, though she strove to remain strong. Would that your sister's wish could guide you now, she whispered. Lyanna wanted no more blood. Ned nodded, feeling the familiar ache in his chest. I know. If we tear away this veil, I fear Robert's wrath. More innocent blood might be shed. The queen said as much, and for once she might be speaking truly. Catelyn knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. Is there no middle path? No way to ensure the realm's safety without lighting a pyre under Robert's feet. He gazed at her, haunted. I do not see it. Everything is sharpened into a single choice. But my heart says that letting the Lannisters rule through deception will only breed worse horrors down the road. Catelyn squeezed his hand fiercely. Ned, I trust your honor. But please, think carefully. Jon Arryn lost his life. Do not let our children lose theirs. Winterfell and the north, we can still return there. Sometimes retreat is the only wise move. He bowed his head. The notion of fleeing with his family hovered in his mind like a fleeting dream. But Robert would never let him simply walk away, not when Ned was the hand. And if Ned vanished, he would do so branded a traitor or coward, leaving the realm at the mercy of Lannister cunning. That night, sleep again eluded him. He stood at his window, staring into the darkness. King's Landing seemed so calm under the moonlight, each roof a quiet sentinel. But beneath that serenity, Ned felt the roil of deeper waters. If he waited too long, the Lannisters might strike first. If he moved too soon, Robert might unleash chaos on them all. Trapped between these dire options, he found no clear path. He uttered a soft prayer to the old gods, seeking their wisdom. Yet all he could hear was the faint memory of Lyanna's voice. "Ned, swear to me," the vow echoed, and he knew in his bones that he must find a way to spare innocents, Targaryens, Baratheons, or anyone else from slaughter. To uphold the vow to his sister, he might have to defy the queen, the king, or half the lords in Westeros. That was the cost of honor in a place where cunning was king. Thus began the waiting game, each day bringing fresh rumors, each night tightening Ned's resolve or stoking his fears anew. The tension with the queen hovered like a drawn sword, and the city itself felt like a tinderbox. As the first leaves of autumn began to drop from the few stunted trees within the Red Keep, Ned Stark prepared to make a choice that would define the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. The memory of Lyanna's dying wish guided him like a star in the night, faint, lonely but steadfast, urging him to protect life even in a land so steeped in blood. And in the quiet recesses of his soul, Ned prayed that honor and mercy could coexist, that he might save the realm from war. If such a miracle were possible, he would give his last breath to see it done.